Chapter 10. Early the next morning, we were up, out, and on our way, heading north, searching for the source of the mysterious light we'd seen the night before. We'd figured we'd take care of the girls later. They could wait. Yeah, let 'em stew, said Pete. Of course, what he really meant was that we hadn't thought of a decent plan yet. We worked our way along the shore on foot, passing a large, shallow cove with a lot of frogs and turtles sitting around on rocks. Pete named it Bullfrog Lagoon. Then we cut inland and picked up a trail. We were almost to the tip of the island, somewhere close to where the light must have come from, when we heard the cry. It was a Tarzan yell, a terrific one, echoing through the forest, deep and powerful. My spine tingled. It was absolutely and positively the best Tarzan yell I'd ever heard outside the movies. I mean it. It could have been the Lord of the Jungle himself. Seconds after it died away, we heard a loud splash, and then nothing. Pete gave me a questioning look, but I just shrugged. The only explanation I could think of wasn't worth mentioning, that Tarzan had just dived into the water to rescue Jane and was wrestling with the crocodile. I motioned to Pete, and we moved ahead slowly and cautiously now. The trees were gigantic in this part of the island, towering over us and casting cool, deep shadows. The forest floor was soft and springy, just right for good sneaking. After about 50 yards, the trail suddenly ended at the lake, or rather it ended at the head of a long, narrow inlet of the lake, with huge trees crowding right up to the shore on both sides. Pete and I hung back among the shadows, sort of sizing things up. There wasn't anybody in the water at the moment, but there definitely had been, and recently too, because hanging directly above the middle of the inlet was a long, thick rope, still swaying. I looked up. The rope itself wasn't hanging from a tree branch because there weren't any branches that reached that far out over the water. Instead, it was suspended from the middle of another rope that had been tied between the tops of two tall trees on opposite sides of the inlet. Something else caught my eye. On the right side of the inlet, about 20 feet up in one of the trees, was a wooden platform built out over the water. It was obviously the jump-off point for the long rope swing across the inlet. Boy, neat, I said to Pete in a low voice. I leaned around the tree for a look at the other side of the inlet, thinking there might be another platform opposite the first one. There was. But there was a lot more besides. I froze, staring. Pete must have seen it too, because I heard him gasp. "Wow," he whispered. There, high in the leafy branches of 3 enormous trees, was a tree house, a fantastic tree house, a tree house with small rooms perched far out on strong branches, and larger rooms with balconies built back in among the leaves, with long rope ladders hanging to the ground and stairways that spiraled around tree trunks and out onto branches, ending in small platforms with sturdy railings and benches for sitting. There were storage barrels and big wooden flower pots and old-fashioned brass lanterns hanging from tree limbs. There were wood buckets on ropes attached to pulleys for drawing water up from the lake, and connecting the 3 trees were long suspension bridges with wood plank floors and rope railings. Suddenly, a voice behind us said, "I think I just about got the hang of it," and Pete and I jumped about a foot in the air. When we came down, we spun around and found ourselves face to face with a pleasant-looking, middle-aged man with a friendly, intelligent face, thinning hair, and a little too much weight around the middle. He was wearing faded cut-offs and beat-up old tennis shoes that were coming apart at the toes. He was dripping wet. He gestured to the rope hanging over the inlet. "Ha! I almost made it that time," he said cheerfully. He gave us the thumbs-up sign. "Looking good, looking good." I wasn't sure what to say. I began politely. "You were trying to swing from one platform to the other?" "That's right," he said. He did 4 or 5 jumping jacks. I've been working at it for a week now, and this was the closest I've come so far. I think it was my Tarzan yell. It really got my adrenaline going. Yeah, it was a great yell. offered Pete. He meant it. Pete does a pretty good Tarzan yell himself. Oh, do you really think so? Said the man, looking pleased. Yeah, I really do, said Pete. It was first rate. I used to practice it in the shower, said the man modestly, but I never knew it would come in handy. It almost did the trick, though. Did you see me? No, we missed it, I said. We were back there in the woods. Well, first I gave my yell, and then I gave this terrific push-off. I was really moving. When I got to the other side, I got both feet on the platform, but I was off balance and I couldn't quite let go of the rope and grab the hand pole. Before I knew it, I was swinging back the other way. He gave a little shrug. It was all over then, of course. I swung back and forth until I couldn't hold on any longer, and then took the big plunge into the lake. Suddenly, I had an idea. I don't suppose you were swinging on your rope last night, were you? I asked him. About 12:30 or 1 o'clock? He looked surprised. I sure was. How did you know? I told him about Pete and me seeing the mysterious light and how it had moved back and forth and then disappeared. That was me, all right, he said. Me and my trusty lantern. I'd been up on my moon viewing platform. Your what? I said. My moon viewing platform. He pointed to the top of the huge tree on the right side of the inlet across from the treehouse, high up, much higher than the rope swinging platform. Almost at the very top of the tree, I could see a small, round platform. I use it to contemplate the moon, but since there wasn't any moon last night, I was up there with my star map, trying to learn the constellations. I couldn't believe it. A moon viewing platform. I was beginning to like this guy better and better. It was a beautiful night, he went on, and when I came down, I was feeling so good I absolutely knew I could swing across the inlet. So I hooked my lantern over my arm, grabbed the rope, and let her rip, he sighed. Then, shaking his head sadly, he leaned forward and peered into the deep water of the inlet. I survived, he said solemnly. But my lantern didn't. Poor thing. It went to a watery grave. Chapter 11. Did you know, Cornelius asked, that we're not alone on the island? There's a fascinating woman camping somewhere about, and 2 charming girls, too, just about your age. Pete choked. Oh, I managed to say, 2 girls? The man's name had turned out to be Cornelius Callahan, and we were midway through a tour of his treehouse. He had been coming to Turtle Island for 3 summers, he said, and each summer he'd added a little more, a room here, a bridge there, an almost impossible rope swing way over there. He had taken us on a roundabout route, just to make things more interesting. First we'd climbed up a long rope ladder into the left-hand tree and gone out a short causeway to the library, a sunny room with bookshelves all around, a cuckoo clock on the wall, a comfortable reading chair, and a solid oak footstool. Then it was up some winding steps to his workshop, cluttered with coils of rope, cans of nails, odds and ends of wood, lots of tools hanging on the walls, and several ongoing projects. After that, we went up another ladder, ducked around the tree, went out on a branch to a sitting platform, and then crossed a long, narrow suspension bridge to the middle tree. We were above the living room and breakfast balcony now, so we left them for later and climbed even higher to his bedroom, a small room with an old leather trunk at the foot of the bed, a bright red rug on the floor, and a hand-carved birdhouse hanging just outside the window. And now, after crossing another long, swaying bridge, we were taking a short rest on a sitting platform high in the 3rd tree. That's right, said Cornelius. 2 girls. They said their names were Jill and Sunny. I met them just this morning. Do you know them? Now, honesty is always the best policy, so I probably should have come right out and admitted everything. I probably should have looked him in the eye, man to man, and said, "Sure, we know them. They're our sworn enemies. In fact, we carried out a midnight raid on their camp last night, but we made a few tactical mistakes while we were there, and we'd really rather not talk about it if you don't mind." But instead, I stammered, well, sort of. I mean, I guess you could say we've met them, but we really don't know them. I mean, we have talked to them a little bit, but we're not best friends or anything." "Well, you might want to get to know them better," said Cornelius firmly. "They're two of the nicest young ladies I've met in a long time." Pete made a kind of gurgling noise. "And Catherine," exclaimed Cornelius's eyes suddenly lighting up. "Catherine is Jill's aunt, you know. What an extraordinary woman! A woman of character and intelligence. A woman of spirit." He paused, gazing dreamily out over the forest. "You should have seen her eyes flash when she told me I was an idiot." He looked delighted. I didn't know exactly what to say, so I just sort of smiled politely. But Pete, as usual, got right to the point. "She called you an idiot?" he asked, looking interested. "She did," said Cornelius, beaming fondly at the memory. "And she was entirely within her rights, too. I deserved everything she said. After all, I knocked over her tripod, squashed her camera case, and I broke her tree." Pete and I stared at him. "You attacked her camp?" said Pete, amazed. Cornelius looked puzzled. "Attacked her camp? Why, no. Why would I want to do that?" No reason," said Pete, backpedaling. He began fiddling with the fringe on his buckskin shirt. "It was just a thought." "I don't even know where her camp is," said Cornelius. "I only met her this morning on my early morning hike," he sighed, remembering. "There she was, as I came around the tree, kneeling in the soft morning light, cinching up the shoelaces on her hiking boots." And for a moment Cornelius seemed lost in wonder. "It was such a lovely vision," he went on, "that I forgot to watch where I was going, and before I knew it, I'd run smack into her tripod. It started to fall over, and when I tried to stop it, I tripped over it, became somewhat entangled in the thing, went down, landing, unfortunately, on her aluminum camera case. But the worst part was that as I was falling, I reached out and grabbed hold of the trunk that was standing next to me. It turned out not to be a real tree trunk at all, but the fake one that Aunt Catherine hides inside when she takes pictures of birds. It was made of cardboard or paper mache or something. I'm afraid I rather destroyed it." "I guess that's when she called you an idiot?" volunteered Pete. "Exactly," said Cornelius. "She called me a blithering idiot, a clumsy oaf, a general all-around menace." His eyes sparkled. "What a woman!" he said. Pete and I exchanged a look. "Of course," he continued, "I felt it was wise to cut my visit short after that, and it was on my way back that I met Jill and Sonny. Naturally, I asked them all about Catherine. Did you know she's a professional wildlife photographer? A darn good one, too, I'll bet. By the way, have you met her?" I shrugged my shoulders and tried to look casual. Briefly," I said. "Very, very briefly. I don't think she'd even recognize us if she saw us again." "How could she? The only time she saw us was at night, and we were wearing a thick coat of mud and leaves from head to toe." "Say, Cornelius, what's that room down there?" said Pete, trying to change the subject. "Oh, that?" said Cornelius. "That's my writing room." He got up. "Come on, I'll show you." We climbed down and went into a small room built across two strong branches at the back of the tree. It was open and airy, with windows all around. In fact, the entire top of the front wall was completely open, with rolled-up canvas to let down in case of rain. Outside, mostly what you saw were leaves, with soft sunlight filtering through them, so that the room had a secret hidden feeling to it. In the middle of the floor, on a faded red and gray Indian rug, was a table with an old typewriter and a messy pile of papers on it. There were stacks of books on the floor, an enormous dictionary on a special stand all by itself, and some watercolor paintings of birds on the walls. "What kind of stuff do you write?" I asked. "Detective novels," replied Cornelius. "I've written 8 Max Malone mysteries, and I'm working on my 9th now." "Wow," I said. "I've never met a real writer before." "Hey, is this one of yours?" asked Pete. He was holding up a paperback called The Buddha Bleeds at Midnight by C.P. Callahan. The picture on the front showed a man with flinty eyes and a trench coat effortlessly blocking a punch thrown by some guy wearing a karate outfit. In the background were a lot of neon signs in Japanese and a scene of an old man sitting on a mat floor staring at a golden Buddha. Across the bottom it said, "Another mystery thriller with Max Malone, the thinking man's private eye." Cornelius nodded. "That's my latest," he said. "I had a lot of fun with that one." "How did you decide to write mysteries?" I asked him. "Oh, I don't know," he said. "I guess it's because I've always loved adventure. In theory, anyway. Can't say that I've really had many adventures myself. It seems like I've spent most of my time at home in front of my typewriter thinking up exciting things for Max Malone to do. In fact, one of the reasons I built this treehouse," he said, looking around with satisfaction, "was that I decided it was about time for me to have a few adventures of my own." Pete flipped through the book. "This looks great," he said. "Do you mind if we borrow it?" "Not at all," said Cornelius. "You can keep it if you like. I have lots more." He asked us if we wanted to have a snack down on his balcony, or breakfast balcony, overlooking the inlet. We said yes, but just as we were heading out the door, I happened to glance back at the typewriter, and suddenly an idea popped into my head. A terrific idea. A brilliant idea. An idea for how to put a certain pair of giggling girls in their places. I stopped. "Say, Cornelius," I said, would it be okay if Pete and I used your typewriter a little later? There's something important we'd like to type." "Sure," he said. "In fact, you can use it right now if you want. You could join me below when you're finished." Pete looked confused, but I hurried on before he had a chance to say anything. "Gee, thanks, Cornelius. That'd be great. There's plenty of typing paper on the table." Cornelius said, "Take your time. I'll just be tidying up a bit. After all, it's always possible Catherine might stop by." He started down the ladder, humming to himself. I pulled Pete back inside. "What's going on?" he wanted to know. I explained my plan. He liked it. He liked it a lot. He said the girls were finished. He said they were goners. He said the hour was at hand when the two of us could once again hold up our heads with pride. When we could once again walk tall among the cool shadows of the deep, dark forest. He said I was a genius. He said I was Pete, a wonderful and fantastic genius, and that I could have his hunting horn, his buckskin shirt, and his very life, if need be. He said, "Pete!" Can we just write the letter? Oh, right. We got down to business. First, we worked out a few details, and then I sat down at the typewriter, put in a clean sheet of paper, and began typing. Half an hour later, we were finished. I pulled the sheet out with a flourish, and we read it again, snickering to ourselves. "And now," I said gleefully as I folded the letter and put it in my pocket, "all we have to do is go back to Bullfrog Lagoon and catch a couple of turtles."